I grew up in the automotive world. My family started working in the General Motors family in 1912. And growing up in Pontiac, Michigan, everything was about cars. And I started getting a job as early as I could because everybody I knew worked all the time. They also had a lot of fun, but everybody took work really serious. And so at 14, as soon as I could get a job, I was a caddy. And I got to then work in pro shops and sell golf clubs and golf clothing and work on tournaments and do all kinds of really fun stuff. And then graduated into the retail industry. My dad, when he was young, had owned a series of clothing stores, and so I grew up around men's fashion. That's kind of a strange conversation today. We don't think of men's fashion much, but we did back then. And worked my way through college in a combination of golf and fashion and factories. Kind of a weird way to do it, but and that opened me up to a lot of things. One of which was when I went to school, college, I was sure I was either going to be a salesman or an entrepreneur. And two things got really clear to me. One was I needed to understand what business was all about. And I needed to speak the language of business. And that required me to get one degree in accounting. And believe me, I'm a very bad bookkeeper. I'm a pretty good accountant, but a bad bookkeeper. And the other one was in IT, systems design. And I'm a terrible programmer, but I'm a real good systems designer. So I learned to understand both the financial side and the technical side as it existed in 1977. And that's really what got me started in business. I wanted to be an entrepreneur or a salesperson, and I needed to understand how to speak the language. People ask all the time, where did revenue science come from? Well, it came from the fact that business is broken into a whole lot of little pieces. There's engineering, and there's finance, and there's HR, and there's sales, and there's marketing, and customer satisfaction. All of these groups needed to work together. And when we looked at those groups, they were actually all pulling in their own direction, trying to do good work, but they didn't speak to the other parts of the company, and they certainly didn't focus on what was the greatest value for the customer. So when you apply revenue science, you get all of those groups to function as one. They all understand their mission is to transfer as much value as possible to ideal buyers who are glad to pay you for it. So it was that recognition of how important the ideal buyer was, and the fact that as a team, a group, we could come together and create a whole new set of value that they'd happily pay us for. That's where it came from. There are certain key elements to applying revenue science, and the whole purpose of revenue science is to apply it in your business or in your job. And the first one of those is probably going to surprise everybody. It's purpose. Your purpose for coming to work or for being an entrepreneur is fundamental to everything else that happens. And you really have two quick choices. One is you're a mercenary. And mercenary is not somebody who's driving around in a Jeep with a machine gun. Mercenary is somebody who goes to Florida after a hurricane and puts roofs on homes or reconnects the electricity. They're really fulfilling an immediate, instantaneous demand of the market. And they're doing a really good job, and they're helping people, but as soon as the hurricane's passed and everybody's got a roof, their business almost disappears until the next hurricane. The other kind of business is what we call a big purpose business. And that is companies or people get up in the morning and say, I'm going to go do something important today. And I'm going to make a difference in my community. I'm going to make a difference in bringing technology to the world that they need. I'm going to help kids get educated. I'm going to do something important. Now, after you have a purpose, then there's some very specific things that you need to do. First one is you need to have a revenue strategy. And that starts with answering 5 questions. Once you've answered those 5 questions, you know where you're going. You understand why you're going there. And you understand how you're going to transfer value to buyers that they'll be glad to pay you for. Once you've done that, you build what's called a true north. And the true north helps your employees, your partners, and your customers know how we're all going to play together. Know things we will do because they're important. They add value to the customer and they add margin to us, and there's things we won't do. Saying no is one of the most important things to a successful business. The next thing you can do now is you can figure out, where the heck do I find my ideal buyers? Every person out there in the market is not a good customer for us. So it's critical to figure out who is a good customer, who is somebody that the work I do that I think is important is going to be glad to see me. And they're going to be asking me, what took you so long to get here? And when we work together, we become partners, and we're helping them make more money and they're helping us make money. Then the next thing is you need a map. And the map is really a process map for how you work today. What you're really going to go do today, how you're going to find those new clients, how you're going to communicate to them, how you're going to make them trust you, believe you, and then eventually create that partnership, deliver that value, and of course get compensated in the short term, but create that long-term joint relationship. Those are the critical elements that every business has to be able to do. Understanding the outcomes of applying revenue science is important to all of us. Most of us are used to applying the outcomes to medical science, and those outcomes are keeping people healthy or getting people healthy. When we think about revenue science, it's the same concept, except it's about getting your business healthy and keeping your business healthy. And if you're an employee in a business, we're keeping your career healthy or getting your career healthy. Revenue science is about helping you make smart decisions every time. Now, smart decisions don't mean they're perfect any more than in medical science. Just because everybody does everything right doesn't mean the patient outcome is always perfect. But you're doing the right things for the right reasons, and you know it. So you have confidence, so that you're feeling that you're in charge. And that's what medical science and revenue science do for the individuals and for the organizations. We put you in charge of your future with confidence that you're making smart decisions, the outcomes are predictable, and in revenue science, we're going to help you live that revenue culture where you have a revenue strategy, you have people that are optimized, they get up in the morning, they like to come to work, they are passionate about what they do, and they believe they're doing something that's helping their community and their families, and they're creating good outcomes because they're inside of a low friction context where they're not being hassled, or they also have the support they need to do their work. And when the day ends, they feel like that was worth coming to work and they're ready to come back the next day. That's the outcomes from applying revenue science.
People ask all the time, where did living a revenue culture come from? Well, it didn't just show up one day in a bolt of lightning. It really came from recognizing the things we were doing for years were disconnected, unproductive, and in all candor created what we call the cost of the chaos to produce revenue. And Everybody said, I want to make the most money possible, but I want to pay my people the least because that helps me make the most. And, I'm going to compromise on the software I buy because it's expensive. And, all of a sudden it became clear that if you really want to maximize profit, you're never going to maximize your profit unless your people are 100% on board with what you're going to do. Then you ask yourself the question, well, how do I get my people on board? Well, the first thing you got to have is you got to have someplace they're going. If you talk about on board, you think, well, we're going to get on a train or a plane or we're going to go someplace. Well, most companies aren't really very good at telling everybody where we're going, so each one can contribute what they're really, really good at. So you have to have a revenue strategy. And then once you have a strategy, you have to onboard your people. You have to train your people. You have to support your people. You have to listen to your people because they're the ones dealing with your customers, whether it's selling or delivering or serving. And so you have to have this, how do I optimize my people to be able to deliver on my revenue strategy? And then the third thing that became obvious is people, in order to be optimized, have to be in a structure that actually supports them. It has the tools they need. It has the training they need. It has the leadership they need. And so that really comes down to what we call a low friction context for doing business, so that you've organized your business in such a way that when your people come to work, first they enjoy it, but they also have the things they need to be able to execute it. So that's where the concept came from. And then the more we looked at it, we realized that in the future, the businesses in the future will succeed when they optimize their people so that the people create additional capacity to transfer value to ideal buyers who will pay for it. And that capacity isn't that you work them harder, it's you work them smarter with the right tools and the right culture, the right environment, so that they get to leverage each other. And the result of leveraging each other is, alignment, it's collaboration, it's cooperation, and it's where you really get innovation that is what drives the future. So if you really want to be a winner in the future, it's going to be because you get additional capacity from the resources you have. And the resources you have are those optimized people in that low friction context, which will create maximum profit possible. That's why we created the podcast for Living a Revenue Culture, to help all of us get there.
Why is the podcast Living a Revenue Culture valuable? And who's it valuable for? Well, first, if you're somebody who leads or owns a company, it's really important for you. Because remember, the definition of living a revenue culture is you maximized your profits because you've optimized your people in a low friction context. So what that means to you as a leader or an owner, it means that first you're making a lot of money, but better than that, you're making a lot of money and your people are totally on board. They are optimized because they're engaged. They're optimized because they get to be innovative, creative. They get to cooperate, collaborate. They get to, in general, enjoy coming to work because they're doing something valuable for both the company, themselves, and your customers. The second group is if you're the employee. So if you're the employee and you're in this place where you've maximized profit, they've been optimized in a low friction context. What that means is they might actually get a living wage. They might have insurance. They might have 401ks. They might have all those things that people want to have for their families and for themselves. And when we say they're optimized, that means they get to be creative. They get to be participants in the decisions, and they get to be innovative, and they get to communicate directly with their customer, and they see the results of the good work they do. So consequently, they enjoy making a difference in the world and getting fairly compensated.
And the fact that it's a low friction context means they're not doing crazy stuff all day long. They don't have to put up with dumb stuff. Or in the sales world, we used to talk about our company has a sales prevention bureau, which was our way of saying our company screws things up so that we have to work twice as hard to make half as much. So the last place that you see the big benefits of living a revenue culture, the podcast, is if you're a professional in the field and you're trying to figure out what can I learn so the work I do is additive to either the employees or the leadership or even their end customer. And so everybody in this has a chance to learn how to make a bigger and bigger impact. That's why one of the things that's important to us is for anybody who listens or watches any of our podcasts, if you think you'd like to be on the podcast, we would love to hear from you, because we love to hear from leaders who are either being successful in creating a revenue culture or aren't being successful and need some new ideas or need some help, or employees who are experiencing either the good news or the bad news and have something more to add, or if you're a professional in the field and you have some new things to bring us. It could be technology, it could be process, it could be ideas, it could be great questions. So any of you who fit those categories and would like to share your experience with living a revenue culture, we'd love to hear from you.
After 30 years of developing the science of revenue generation and applying it in huge organizations and mom and pop and startups and every other place you can think of, one of the passions was, how do I take all of this ability to see things in a new way, to know the difference between dumb stuff and smart stuff beforehand. And writing a book seemed to be the natural way to do that. Because someday I'm not going to work anymore, but I don't want people to have to learn all those things all over again. And so the book is that opportunity for people to look at the foundation of how you create a sustainable company that can continually produce more profitable revenue. That was the goal of creating that book, is so everybody else can take some advantage of 30-some years of learning. Everybody talks about purpose in business, and they kind of use purpose as the motivator. But really, purpose is the foundation of everything. If your purpose is to transfer value to other people, and it's to do it with a what we call a revenue culture, where you maximize your profits because you optimized your people in a low friction context. What that means is low friction context is someplace they like to come to work. They're thrilled to do something they enjoy. They see they're having an impact on their customer, their client, whatever you want to call them. The employee says, I'm glad I'm making a difference in their world. And that customer, that client, they're thrilled to partner with somebody they can trust, somebody they feel is like them. And that creates that long-term relationship where the seller is adding value to the buyer, so the buyer is doing things they can't do without that seller. And that makes the selling team proud, and it makes the buying team feel safe and trusting. It just makes a huge difference. Purpose is what drives everything. People ask all the time, what's the future of revenue science? And I think of it as like medical science. When doctors started 5,000 years ago, they were kind of solo practitioners, and nobody really involved other sciences of what sciences there were 5,000 years ago. But today there's 76 different sciences as part of medical science. Revenue science today has 40-some sciences as part of it. But what's most important is to create a community of people who are committed to making it available for everybody to live a revenue culture where you maximize profit, optimize people in a low context environment. It's how do we collectively as individuals come together? And so the more we become a community, the more we share, the more we work together as a team to fulfill each other and transfer the maximum value possible to the ideal buyer, the better the future for all of us. Going forward, capacity is going to be the issue. We need more people than we literally have in the community. And so helping people be fulfilled at work so they don't burn out, so they don't want to quit, so they're having fun, and while they're making it easier to transfer more value to their customers so their customers' world gets better. That's where we got to go. And hopefully that's someplace you want to go along with us, because that's what I'm hoping.